Hi everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's begin. My name is Nathan. I'd been engaged to Lauren for 3 months when she asked for a prenup that would ultimately protect me from her rather than her from me. 3 months of planning a wedding that would never last because she couldn't handle discovering she'd misjudged the financial landscape completely. My family owns several businesses in the Portland area. It was a small chain of storage facilities, some logistics operations. Boring businesses that generate steady income and appreciate slowly over time if you keep your expenses low. As the only son with 2 sisters who'd chosen careers outside the family operations, I'd been gradually given significant assets, starting in my mid-20s. Properties titled in my name, shares in the family businesses, trust accounts set up by my grandparents. By the time I was 30, I had substantial wealth on paper, even though I worked a regular job in supply chain management. But I've always kept it private and driven a modest car, a Honda that's easy to maintain. I lived in a lovely but not extravagant apartment, dressed in regular clothes from normal stores. I never bragged about money or displayed wealth obviously. Part of this was personality. I'm naturally low-key. Part was intentional. I'd seen how differently people treated you when they knew you had money, how relationships could become transactional, and how you couldn't tell who valued you and who valued your resources. I met Lauren through mutual friends at a casual group dinner over 3 years before the prenup conversation. She worked in arts and design, creating marketing materials for cultural organizations. She was beautiful, striking features, creative style, and articulate, confident about her career and her life path. I liked that she seemed grounded despite working in a field often associated with pretension, and that she didn't appear overly impressed by appearances or material things. All in all, she seemed to value authenticity. We started dating and took things relatively slow. Both of us had demanding careers, so we'd see each other mostly on weekends. I kept my apartment, she kept hers. We'd alternate staying at each other's places, maintaining our independence while building a relationship. The relationship felt healthy. Good communication, compatible values, similar views on major life questions. After about 2 years, I proposed. She said yes enthusiastically. We started planning a wedding for the following year. Throughout our relationship, I'd never explicitly hidden my family's wealth, but I'd never advertised it either. If asked about my family, I'd mention they own some businesses. If asked about my finances, I'd say I'm comfortable and contribute to the family's operations. But I drove that Honda, lived in that lovely apartment, and worked. Nothing about my visible lifestyle suggested significant wealth. Lauren had her own career and financial independence. She earned decent money in her design work, had her own apartment, her own car, her own life. We split expenses when we were together. About 2 months before the wedding date we'd set, we had dinner at a nice restaurant downtown on a Friday evening. Over wine, Lauren said casually that she'd been thinking, that she wanted a prenup, that we should keep everything separate financially. My immediate internal response was relief. I'd been considering suggesting a prenup for months. My parents had repeatedly urged me to protect the family's assets and had offered to pay for attorneys to draft a comprehensive document. But I'd been hesitant to bring it up, worried Lauren would think I was planning for failure because suggesting asset protection would signal I didn't trust her or believe in our marriage. So when she suggested it herself, I felt this weight lift. Nodded immediately. Told her that sounded like a great idea. She seemed pleased. Said she thought it was important for modern couples to maintain financial independence. That she'd always been self-sufficient and wanted to stay that way. I agreed completely, telling her that I respected her independence and thought separate finances made sense. Over the following days, Lauren had her attorney draft a prenup, a basic document stating that whatever assets each of us brought into the marriage remained ours individually. Whatever we acquired during marriage would be divided in the event of a divorce, but premarital assets would remain separate. I had my family's attorney review it. He carefully read through and then made several recommendations. He wanted to add specific language about the family businesses and properties. He also wanted to enumerate the trust accounts and make everything explicitly airtight while being legally defensible. We went through several rounds of revisions. Lauren's attorney and my attorney were going back and forth. Eventually, we reached a document that was comprehensive and clear. Lauren seemed fine with all the changes. Her attorney apparently explained that it was standard protective language, that prenups needed to be detailed to be enforceable. We both signed, got it notarized, filed appropriately. The prenup was finalized about a month before the wedding. Lauren clearly assumed we were financial equals, that this prenup was protecting her design business and her assets from me just as much as protecting whatever I had from her. I didn't correct this assumption, but I didn't create it either. I'd never lied about my finances. I just hadn't volunteered detailed information. We got married quietly in the presence of family and close friends only. It was a lovely ceremony at a hotel venue, reception in their ballroom. Everything was tasteful but not ostentatious. Immediately after the wedding, we moved into a bigger place, a house in a nice neighborhood. Lauren assumed I'd bought it recently as part of preparing for married life. Reality was that the house had been in my family's real estate portfolio for years. They'd been renting it out until it became vacant around the time of my engagement. They felt it would be a befitting wedding gift. But I didn't explain any of that. Just let Lauren think we were buying our marital home together. Our lifestyle after marriage was comfortable but simple. Lauren would occasionally suggest upgrades. Better furniture for the living room. An additional weekend car. More expensive vacations. I'd gently push back. Say I preferred saving and investing, was old-fashioned about spending, and valued financial security over lifestyle inflation. She'd tease me about being overly cautious and being old-fashioned in my 30s. But she'd generally accept my preference for moderate spending. A few months into the marriage, Lauren mentioned casually that her grandparents were relatively well off, that they'd accumulated significant wealth through smart investments and real estate. They planned to leave substantial inheritances to their grandchildren in the future. I smiled and told her that it was wonderful. I let her know that I was happy for her. Internally, I noted the information, but didn't particularly care. I'd never been interested in marrying someone for their money or their family's money. Lauren could have come from poverty or wealth. It wouldn't have changed how I felt about her. Life continued pleasantly. We'd been married just over a year. The relationship felt good. I trusted Lauren, believed we were building a solid partnership. Then I had to travel for work. A 3-day trip to Los Angeles for meetings. My father couldn't handle it. Some contract negotiations with a major client of one of our logistics operations. I left on a Tuesday morning and returned Friday afternoon. When I came home, I immediately noticed something was different. Lauren was polite but cold. Her usual greeting was perfunctory rather than warm. Her body language was closed off. That evening, I noticed she'd been in my home office. Some files were moved. Papers I'd left in one configuration were now arranged differently. I didn't say anything, but I knew. She'd seen things she wasn't meant to see. My office contained files related to the family businesses, portfolio summaries showing property values, trust account statements, legal documents detailing ownership structures, everything my family had set up over the years. I'd kept these files in my office rather than hiding them in a safe or storage facility. Never thought I needed to hide financial records in my own home. Never imagined Lauren would go through my private papers. But during my 3-day absence, she'd done precisely that. 2 nights after I returned, Lauren finally spoke up. She came into the living room to meet me, where I was unwinding. She asked bluntly why I hadn't told her how much I was worth. I looked at her, genuinely confused by the question. Told her I hadn't hidden anything, that I just didn't think money was the foundation of what we had. Lauren got angry, said I'd fooled her into signing the prenup, that she thought we were financial equals, that I'd let her believe I was just a regular guy with a regular job. I stayed calm, reminded her that she'd wanted the prenup, that she'd said we should keep everything separate, that I'd agreed because it seemed smart for both of us, not because I was trying to trap her. She insisted she'd thought we were equals, that she'd assumed I had similar assets to hers, that by not disclosing my full financial situation, I'd essentially deceived her. I asked what she would have done differently if she'd known about my family's wealth. She didn't answer, just stared at me with this mixture of anger and something that looked like betrayal. But the question hung in the air. What would she have done differently? Pushed for a different prenup that gave her access to my assets? Viewed our relationship through a financial lens? Expected me to fund a more expensive lifestyle? Whatever the answer was, it clearly wasn't that she'd have done nothing differently. Her reaction made it clear that my family's money mattered to how she viewed our relationship. After that conversation, things never felt the same between us. Lauren started pulling away emotionally. Less affection, more silence. When she did talk, it was often complaints about things that had never bothered her before. I tried to bridge the gap, tried having conversations about what was really wrong, tried to understand her perspective. But every attempt felt forced. She'd reject my overtures, both emotional and physical. She would turn away when I wanted to touch her affectionately and would shut down conversations about our relationship. One night, I tried initiating intimacy. She rejected me coldly, turned away in bed without explanation. I lay there in the dark, realizing the truth. This wasn't about money. This was about pride. Lauren couldn't stand that she'd misjudged the situation, that the prenup she designed to protect her financial independence had actually protected my significantly larger assets, that she'd accidentally created the exact legal structure that prevented her from accessing wealth she hadn't known existed when she signed. As months passed, Lauren became increasingly distant and restless. She would make hurtful remarks about how I'd manipulated her. She would read malicious intent into innocent gestures I made. She said once that I must have loved watching her sign that prenup, that I'd probably been laughing internally while she thought she was being so smart and independent. I kept quiet. There was no winning with someone who'd already decided they were the victim. The subtle disrespect grew into passive-aggressive comments, indifference to anything I said or did, nights out without explanation of where she'd been or who she'd been with. About 2 years into the marriage, Lauren's grandparents passed away within months of each other. She inherited exactly what she'd mentioned, property and substantial investments. I congratulated her sincerely, told her I was happy that her grandparents had provided for her, that she deserved their generosity. Lauren didn't even smile. She just looked at me with an expression that clearly said she was comparing her inheritance to what she imagined I had. The inheritance was significant by usual standards, but apparently not compared to the wealth she'd discovered I had. And that comparison poisoned any joy she might have felt. The warmth that had once filled our home was completely gone, just quiet tension. Two people occupying the same space, but living separate lives. One evening, Lauren said she talked to someone, an attorney, presumably, said they told her she might have signed the prenup under false assumptions. I nodded slowly, asked if she meant assumptions she'd created. Since I'd never told her I didn't have money and had never misrepresented anything, I just lived modestly and did not volunteer information she'd never asked for. She stormed off. Didn't want to hear that maybe she'd assumed rather than been deceived. A few weeks later, I was served with divorce papers. The filing cited irreconcilable differences. I didn't contest it. I didn't fight the divorce itself because I didn't see the point in trying to save a marriage where my wife resented me for having money I'd never flaunted. Lauren's attorney tried to argue that the prenup was signed under pretenses, that I'd failed to disclose material information, and that the document should be invalidated. My attorney countered with evidence that Lauren had initiated the prenup conversation, that her attorney had reviewed and approved all the language, that I'd made no false statements about my finances, had simply not volunteered information she'd never asked for. The prenup held up completely. The judge found no basis for invalidation. Whatever assets we'd each brought into the marriage stayed ours individually. We divided the few things we'd acquired together during our 2 years of marriage. Lauren moved out, taking what was hers. We had no children, no complicated custody arrangements. Just the dissolution of a short marriage that had died when she'd discovered I wasn't who she'd assumed. Months later, I learned through mutual friends that Lauren's family had encouraged her to file for divorce. They had apparently consulted with attorneys, hoping to find a loophole to invalidate the prenup. When that strategy failed, when it became clear she'd leave the marriage with exactly what she'd brought into it, they'd apparently been disappointed, probably expected some payout. I can't tell how authentic this information was. Even after the divorce, Lauren apparently still claimed to be the victim. She would tell people she'd been tricked, and that I'd deceived her into signing away her rights. I didn't respond publicly, didn't try to correct her narrative. People who knew me understood the truth. People who didn't weren't my concern. I reflected a lot on what happened, on how a prenup that should have protected both of us ended up exposing the relationship's fundamental flaw. Lauren had wanted everything separate. She'd said those exact words when she'd proposed the prenup, that we should keep everything separate. I'd thought she meant financially, because she valued independence and autonomy. It turned out she'd meant emotionally, too. She'd wanted the security of marriage with the freedom of complete autonomy. She probably wanted access to my life without truly joining it. The funny thing about the prenup is that it worked exactly as designed. Protected each of our premarital assets completely. She thought it was protecting her from me, and that she was being smart and independent by insisting on separate finances. It turned out it was protecting me from her, from the resentment that emerged when she realized she'd accidentally locked herself out of the wealth she'd wanted access to. The irony isn't lost on me. Lauren designed her own financial separation. I just agreed to it. Looking back now, months since the divorce was finalized, I understand everything more clearly. I learned that some people view relationships transactionally, that Lauren had apparently seen our marriage partially through a financial lens, even while claiming to value independence. I learned that hiding wealth isn't the same as keeping it private. I'd never lied. I had just lived modestly and not volunteered information. But Lauren had interpreted privacy as deception. I learned that prenups reveal character. The way Lauren reacted to discovering my assets, with resentment rather than happiness for me, showed who she fundamentally was. I learned that you can't reason someone out of a story they've already written. Lauren had decided she was the victim of deception. No amount of facts or logic would change that narrative. Most importantly, I learned that when someone insists on keeping everything separate, believe them. Lauren had wanted separation. She got exactly what she asked for. Some people think I should have disclosed my full financial situation earlier, as I was deceptive by living modestly and not disclosing my family's wealth. But I disagree. I never lied about anything, never pretended to be poor, just lived within normal means and didn't lead with my family's money when building relationships. That's not deception. That's wanting to be valued for who I am rather than what I have. Lauren had every opportunity to ask questions about my finances. We were planning a marriage. She could have asked directly about assets, about family wealth, about financial details. She never did. Just assumed based on my visible lifestyle that I was solidly middle class, like she was. And when she discovered her assumptions were wrong, she blamed me for not correcting assumptions she'd never voiced. That's not my failure. That's hers. I don't regret the divorce. Don't regret that the prenup protected me exactly as written. Only regret the time I spent married to someone who apparently valued financial position more than partnership. Someone who could have been happy with me but chose resentment instead when she discovered information that didn't affect our daily life at all. Because here's the truth. I never would have changed our lifestyle based on Lauren knowing about my family's wealth. We'd still have lived in that same house, driven similar cars, had the same basic existence. The only thing that would have changed is her attitude, her sense of entitlement, her expectation of access to resources I'd spent a lifetime being private about. And apparently, that knowledge of wealth she couldn't access because of a prenup she designed was more important to her than our actual relationship. That's not love. That's not partnership. That's transactional thinking disguised as marriage. So the prenup did precisely what it was supposed to do: protected my assets from someone who turned out to value them more than she valued me. Lauren wanted everything separate, then chose resentment over partnership. Chose victimhood over accepting that she'd gotten exactly what she'd asked for. That was her choice.